can go ahead actually and start. So please do let us know in the chat. In case you can't hear us, just type into the chat that you can't. Otherwise, just let us know that you can hear us, and then we'll kick off. I think a few of you can hear us. All right, good. Yeah, you can hear. Thank you for letting us know that. So once again, yeah, all of you can hear us. Okay, good. So then I guess let's just get started. So welcome first of all, everybody, to our third webinar, a third webinar in the series of 4. We're running 4 webinars in total that are all geared towards really preparing ourselves and our workforces to deal with the uncertainty that have been brought about by COVID-19. So in the last webinar, for those of you who joined us, we looked at more managing a remote workforce. And I'm glad to see, even just from the names here, that many of those of you who connected with us in the last one, you're back with us this time round as well. So I'll just give it a second for the screen to load. And then we'll get started with our session today. Great. Okay. Somebody's saying, good to hear you again. I hope you won't get bored of Nuru's and my voices. You've been hearing us a lot. So in this webinar now today, we're going to be looking at managing change and transition, specifically in these uncertain times. And of course, it is a reality for all of us. You know, no business, no organization right now has any degree of certainty. So we understand that everybody's navigating through these times, and we figured why not share some of our lessons in our experience that we've had. So as usual, our webinar is 90-minute long. And we always leave about 20 minutes for some of your live questions. And those live questions, you can just put them in the Zoom chat function. So we'll take note of them and get back to them at the end. At the same time, I know many of you submitted questions in advance via the poll function. So thank you for the many, many people who took time to raise their questions. And we have integrated, as usual, those questions into the presentation as best as we can. So for those of you who it's the first time with us today, my name is Faye. I'm the Managing Director of RavelWorks Africa, and I'll be running the webinar together with my colleague Nuru. Nuru, perhaps you just take a moment to introduce yourself as well.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Nuru.
Oh, good afternoon.
Yes,
my name is Nuru. I work with Faye at RavelWorks. It's a pleasure to be meeting with some of you again.
Thanks, Nuru. So in terms of, I know people are always curious to see what are the audience demographics, who do we have here on the call with us? So in terms of our demographics, the people who have signed up for this webinar, quite again, a very, very diverse audience. So we've got people from various sectors and industries, but also we have people logged in from West Africa. We've got our colleagues from East Africa here. We've got Europe, the Middle East. And I also want to say a special thank you to some of the membership bodies that have decided to participate on a regular basis. So in terms of the membership bodies, we've got HR Mao represented here, the Human Resource Managers Association of Uganda. We have the Interagency Working Group, so welcome everybody from Interagency Working Group, and of course Nairobi Garage, who have collaborated with us on this as well. So welcome everybody from Nairobi Garage. So as usual, a disclaimer for all of our webinars. You can mute your microphone if you haven't yet. Thank you. So you'll always find a mute microphone option on all of your screens, so that we don't interfere with the audio of the webinar. So As usual, all of our webinars have a bit of a disclaimer. So let me just walk you through the disclaimer to make sure that we're clear. So none of our webinars are in any way a legal advice or legal opinion. You know, you will always need to still cross-check with your lawyers or your legal teams. And also our webinars do not replace any advice that comes from your government agencies or other health ministries like CDC or WHO. So it's really just for information purposes based on our experiences and also some of the requests that we're getting from you. In today's webinar, some of the main takeaways will be around a change and why we behave the way we do while navigating change, right? So there's always the disconnect between what the theory says, what we know we should do, and then, you know, how we practically do it when it hits us. We'll look at some strategies on how do we actually overcome the resistance, both our own resistance, but also at organizational and at team level. How do we lead the processes successfully? And finally, how do we deal with some of this uncertainty at individual and team level? So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'll just give you a couple of words on who is RavelWorks Africa, who are you listening to for the next 90 minutes. So at RavelWorks Africa, the main question and the main thing that we deal with you and all of our other clients is really the question of what makes a great place to work, right? What makes a great organization? And that's the question which we try to answer in all of our work. And we do that really by looking at some fundamental components in terms of, you know, how do you become fit for future and fit for purpose as an organization? You know, how do you get the right skills, the right competencies and confidence into your workforce? And we look at you really holistically in the sense of all of the pieces that make up an organization, be it your organizational systems, your organizational strategy, your culture, your people management approaches, etc. And particularly in the current climate, a lot of those elements are changing, right? You need to review them. We need to re-examine how we've been doing work before. So with those few opening remarks, Nuru, let me hand over to you to start to kick us off, you know, about change and transition. Nuru.
Thank you, Faye. So to get us started, I want us to take a poll, all right? And what I'd like you to do is to rate on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being no real impact and 5 being serious disruption, the impact of COVID-19 on you as an individual. Take into consideration all aspects of your life, you know, your career, your business in general. So once you've done the poll, just close that screen so that you can navigate back to the slides. Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds to do this. Is everybody being able to do the poll? Anyone struggling? Sorry, did someone say something? Okay. I'll give a few more seconds. Okay. Okay. Okay, remember to close the poll so that you can go back to the slide that you are on. All right, so let us see how did we fare? What did we say the impact of COVID-19 is in our lives? Let's see. Okay, so this is what we've gotten. We have 3.6% of you, around 3 people, saying very little impact. We have some people say some level of impact in their lives, which is 29.8%. And then around the majority of you are citing significant disruption or serious disruption in your lives. Now, this is supporting what we already know. There is a lot of disruption in our lives right now, okay? Now, moving to the next slide. We have had it said that the only constant thing in life is change. In fact, you will see on the slide the quote by Charles Darwin, who takes it a notch further. And says, "It is not the strongest or the most intelligent who survive, but those who can best manage change." And I really like that quote. Now, at the beginning of 2020, we all had priorities. We had strategies, at an organization level, at individual levels. There were things we wanted to achieve, isn't it? All this has shifted in a matter of months. Now, for most of us, the initial plans basically have had to be shelved, and for us to now move into survival mode to just get through this pandemic. I know we are working with a lot of our clients to even shift some of the work that we were doing. At the beginning of the year, we were not talking with a lot of our clients about setting up remote work policies. Now that is what we're doing, trying to work with them to find ways to keep remote teams connected, and then, we're having questions we're having to tackle with our clients that we didn't think we would be dealing with to the magnitude that we are now, including issues on unpaid leave, when can I let my staff go, revisiting policies. Even the coaching we've been doing has changed slightly so that we can be able to make sure that the people that we are coaching are getting what they need to get through this period and to get their staff and their teams through this period, okay? So at individual level, we're also going through change, okay? For me as an individual, even as I work with Faye and with the rest of our team, I have to deal with my children. Now they have online classes. You see, now when I'm on a Zoom call with you, I would tell them, keep quiet. Now they're telling me to keep quiet because now they're on Zoom calls. That's quite a change for me, I have all these fears and anxieties as a parent, as an employee, as a staff member, that I have to deal with on a regular basis, okay? There are things we took for granted, leaving our homes to have a cup of coffee, to shop, to, just even to make my hair, that, just changed at the snap of a finger. Now, as leaders, HR practitioners, and as managers, you need to manage change in your respective organizations, but also remember that the people that you're dealing with are dealing with personal change outside of all the organizational change that is going through. They are one person. I am one Nuru, okay? So as Faye mentioned, our webinar today should really help us introspect in the changes we are navigating, thinking about why is it so hard, and then it's even harder because of the crisis, and how can we ease this process of change for ourselves and our team members alike and manage in uncertainty, okay? So, and for sure, what we need to remember is change is really, really important to us, okay? It is not something that we can say, we don't feel like changing today, we'll do. No, change is really, really important, all right? Now let's talk about the science behind change. Why is it hard? Okay. Now, at the beginning of every year, I make good resolutions, I think, at that point, I wasn't making resolutions to manage a pandemic. Of course, we didn't know what was coming, but you know what? I was going to join a gym. I say, I'm going to learn a new skill. I'm going to have a different source of income. The list is endless. I am very, very clear about the changes I want. And I have amazing, ideas. Then, usually by around March, I start to think, okay, but what I'll do, I'll just start tomorrow, That course I wanted to do, I'll push it. I'll start it in the month of March. And your guess is as good as mine. By the end of the year, usually, I've only ticked off one. Now, so I started my journey into change management fundamentally because I wanted to know why I could not resist one additional piece of cake when I should not have had the first one to begin with, because you know what? I had a good idea. I wanted to lose some weight, so I went on a diet. So I really wanted to understand, why is it so hard to implement all my good ideas, all these changes I want to make to my life? Okay, so because only by grasping the why then would I be able to start to change the tide, okay? So being more self-aware of the things that held me back would help me not only navigate the change in my life, but also understand why people behave the way they do during a change process. And then I can reach out, then I can comfortably say, is this what you're going through? Or I think I get it. It's because of 1, 2, 3, 4. So really, when I started to think about change and embrace change management, it started from me as an individual, okay? Now, change is constant. And right now, when we hear change, the first thing that comes to our mind is COVID-19, okay? That is for many people, what is happening. It's a negative change that is happening. I just want to point out that when we think about change, we are hardwired to think about negativity. Yeah? In fact, that's what we are wired to do. So, but let's think about the positive changes that we have, okay? People get married, you get a new job. That is part of a change process. And you know what it is? That you go through transformation and you stretch yourself, okay? So you start from a very optimistic level. You are very happy with the things that you're going to do. You're excited. And then the reality checks in and, oh my God, you start to be a bit pessimistic. Huh? Oh my, this is not what I expected. The honeymoon is over. Maybe if it's a new job, my colleagues are not really good to me. If it's remote working, maybe if you're one of those people who embraced it, you're thinking this is an amazing thing. And then you're thinking, oh my God, my Wi-Fi doesn't work. Is this really what I want? I want to connect people. And then you embrace your new reality and you start to make realistic plans to move forward and you go back to optimism. Usually that's how a positive change works. On the other hand, we have negative change, okay? And now we think about COVID-19, but negative change can be anything. Could be loss of a loved one, loss of a job, But right now we are navigating the impact of changes from COVID-19. More often what we're doing is we are finding it to be hard, isn't it? And negative, all right? So we are going to look at human psychology at a fundamental level. How does our brain work, okay? Now, I'm going to of course, if there's a scientist in this room, I know the brain there's a lot of science happening there. I'm just going to look at it, like I said, at a very fundamental level, okay? So we have a rational mind and an emotional mind, okay? Now, you can see from the picture of my screen, there is a man and there's an elephant, isn't it? Huh? Okay? Now, your rational, I'm going to get back to our man and elephant right now, all right? First, let's talk about these two sides of your brain. Now, your rational mind, it plans the future. It's analytical and it rationalizes. It is where all my good ideas come from. Huh? These are my plans. This is what I'm going to do. All the things I want to do, which are really good. That's where they come from, okay? And then on the other side, we have our emotional mind. That's the side that feels pain and pleasure, It's also the side that shows love and compassion and sympathy and loyalty. However, it is the side that tells you, don't do the report right now, okay? What you could do is just watch one more TV show and then you can do the report later. It's the side that pushes you to procrastinate, okay? Now, both the rational and emotional side must work together. Now, the picture that you're seeing on the screen is based on a theory by a gentleman called Jonathan Haidt. And it's further explained by Dan and Chi. Now, what they do is they compare the emotional mind to an elephant, and then the rider
Sorry, we lost Nuru for a moment. Can the rest of you still hear
the
us?
rational mind, okay? Oh, can you hear me now? Where did you lose me?
We lost you, Nuru, but it's fine. You were explaining to us how the elephant is the emotional part and the rider is the more rational one. Okay. Okay, no problem. I can see Nuru's connection is maybe lost. Can you hear me? So this is Faye talking right now. Can you hear Faye talking right now? Just put it in the chat if you can. Okay, great. All right. So where we lost Nuru was really her.
The rider.
Stop back. No, Nuru, you're gone again.
Oh, okay. Hello. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Nuru. Please proceed.
Okay, and these are some of the changes that we are having to navigate right now, trying to figure out how to manage our Wi-Fi. My apologies to all. Please let me know if I disconnect again, okay? So I was saying, the rider, the small man on top there, is your rational mind, okay? The elephant is your emotional mind, okay? Now it looks like from that picture, the rider can control the elephant, isn't it? Tell it where to go, but that's not true, okay? As the rider makes plans, well, the emotional mind, needs to be appealed to, okay? Now, I want just think about, the dad that never took off your gym membership, the course that was really good for you, and you started, but you never really finished. That was your rational brain. It had a good idea. We need to do this course to build this skill. We are in quarantine right now. The right thing to do is to learn to build my capacity. But why didn't it happen? You did not appeal, you did not motivate your emotional brain. So you are not in sync. Huh? And so this good idea you had remains a good idea. And there's procrastination. We'll start tomorrow. This is so hard, and that's what we need to change. Now, for change to happen, the elephant must be in tune again with your rider, okay? Must be in tune. So when I found out about this, I said, oh, okay. So now we know what the issue is. I have my rational mind, I have my good ideas that should move forward. And I guess there's a challenge. I need to motivate my elephant, my emotions, they need to be in sync so that I can achieve what I need to achieve. But the reality is that's not really what happened immediately. So prior to answering the question of how to motivate that elephant, I want us to talk about the Kubler-Ross curve, okay? And maybe we can just move our screen to the Kubler-Ross curve. Thank you very much, okay? Now, for those who joined us in the last webinar, we talked about the Kubler-Ross curve as regards remote working, okay? Let's look at it as a change process, okay, as part of a change process. Now, the Kubler-Ross curve describes the internal and emotional journey that individuals typically experience with dealing with change and transition, okay? Now, you can see, what this guy is going through on the screen. It's first, just think about it in terms of even COVID-19, the shock. What? Oh, really? And it's serious? What is this that's happening to us? And then people moved into denial phase. And what we are doing there is this disbelief, okay? There's a resistance to facts, okay? We say to ourselves, this can't be happening right now. After all, we have flus all the time. Are you really serious about this? It can't, it doesn't. First of all, if you remember, in fact, for people from the African continent, in the initial phases, what did we say? No, this is not happening. We are not seeing the cases in Africa because we were in denial, okay? And then, of course, here we are now dealing with COVID-19, all right? And then we get to the anger phase, what is the government doing about it? Why was there no plan beforehand? Why didn't they share information? And if it's your organization, you send people, say, on remote working, they're saying, oh, why didn't they ever send us before? Why are they doing it? People are just angry. What they're doing is trying to navigate that change. They're frustrated and they need to pour out that outrage and blame to someone else. So it's so unfair. And then, people get into depression sometimes, I can't do this. And unfortunately, the people who stay there, we're not going to go into, who stays where and what, but people get into depression phase. I can't do this anymore. It's too overwhelming for me. Because remember, as part of change, there is loss. I am stopping to do something I used to do a certain way. That is part of loss, okay? Yeah. And then, after a while, during this time, we start to think, okay, but wait a minute. Yeah? Okay, so this is my situation. I am home right now. Say I'm remote working. What are my options? What can I do differently? How can I make this my new norm? So we explore options and we move on. Okay. And this is what is happening to us, right? For a few people, who said they were in acceptance, we're saying we're fine. We're getting there. It might not be so bad to be at home. I'm with my family. I can see my children. I can make meals and still be a productive employee. So really you explore and people get to acceptance and commitment, okay? Now, you've seen the curve. everybody has seen it. What I would like us to do again is just do a small poll, okay? And what I want you to do is to figure out where you are now on the Kubler-Ross curve as regards dealing with COVID-19 as an individual. I'll give you a few seconds. Please let us know if you cannot see the poll. And once you've done the poll, kindly close your screen so that you can navigate back to the slides.
Where is the volume part? But it was coming on.
Okay. Give us a few more seconds. Let's see. I hear. Okay. I think we can close the poll now if we have enough. Okay, all right, thank you very, very much. We've seen the results. Oh, wow, this is really good. We have almost 43% of people on this call today at exploration phase. So you're already looking at the opportunities. What can I do differently, you know, to change the situation that I'm in? We have around 33.9% people in acceptance. We still have a few people in shock, you know, what is happening? And we have a few people in denial, and we still have people who are frustrated, you know, they're angry, what is happening? And we have a few people in depression. This is normal, I will tell you, okay? This is a normal reaction, okay? And for each of us, it takes us different times to navigate that curve, to move from denial, from the anger to get to acceptance. It takes different times because we are circumstances, okay? And some people just react to change, you know, very easily. It's change, and even our own personalities come in play, okay? What we need to do is to know that this is where I am, this is the reason where I am here, and this is where I need to go, okay? Now, we go back now to, you know, we move back now from moving from our shock and denial to acceptance. Now, remember, we need to motivate our elephant, right? To move from all these phases and get to acceptance, right? So how do we do that? Because this is the change curve. How do we change? How do we motivate ourselves? You know, which was the question that was pertinent to me, okay? So in the next slide, you will see we're looking at some of the strategies that we can put in place, okay? One of them is, number one, direct the rider, okay? Okay, you can see our elephant and our man there. One, direct the rider, okay? Remember, the rider is your rational brain, eh? You need to give very clear instructions, okay? Very clear. Do not overthink situations, okay? Script the critical moves, okay? And the thing you have to understand about your rider is it also over-analyzes and overthinks situations. That's actually one of the reasons that even shopping is so tiring, because you go and there are so many decisions you have to make about one particular product, okay? So you need to give very clear directions as to what you want to achieve, okay? Don't use words like Sam, Ali. Be specific. If I want to wake up at 5 in the morning, it's not early in the morning, it's 5 in the morning, so that I can do my course on, so that I can achieve this. Very clear direction. The rider doesn't like to operate in ambiguity. Remember that, okay? Now, the other thing we want us to change is motivate our elephant, okay? Now, usually, you know, when we tell people, this is the big change we want you to make, you know what? People freeze. Okay, because it now looks overwhelming. So what elephant, by shrinking, being very concise to say, okay, so maybe we want to do a course. We go in and find this course is a course for 4 weeks. Am I going to be available to do this over 4 weeks? Even if it's, you know, during this pandemic period? shrink it, okay? We can do this for 20 minutes every day. If we do this course, what we are going to do is get this skill. If we get this skill, then we are going to have bettered ourselves. Remember, you're trying to employ passion, isn't it? Yeah? You're trying to make sure that your elephant feels good, that, you know, this is a good thing for us. We're going to do it together. And that's the only way then you can get moving, okay? So shrink your change. Appeal to the need for change, okay? Just knowing what to do is not enough. That's what the radar means. Shape the path. What we want you to do is to reduce the obstacles. I'll give you an example. I want to build my skill during COVID-19. My children usually wake up at 7:30. Now, once they are awake, I can't do anything except deal with them. So what do I need to do? If I woke up maybe at 6:30 in the morning and I have chunked it up, my elephant is happy, we're just doing this for 30 minutes, it's not too long. And my rider is very clear on what we are going to achieve, then it makes it easier for me to change my behavior, okay? So make the journey downhill. One of the challenges we have is our changes are so hard. It's an uphill task. People get tired if every time they think about change, they think this is so hard, okay? So you want to shape the path so that it is easier for your team to navigate, okay? Change, and even for you as an individual. Now, other books that I would recommend, we've talked about Switch by Dan and Chip Heath, and the other one is Chimp Paradox, which RavelWorks team members are currently, you know, we've been reading for 2020. I love this book. And really, in this book, what the author does is he equates the elephant to a chimp. Huh? So if you want to understand how your brain works, you know, there are great resources out there. What I like is then fundamentally it helps you to understand why sometimes, you know, you don't achieve what you need to achieve because you're not making changes. Now, Faye, I think I will pass this over to you so that then you can take us through navigating change at organizational level.
Thank you, Nuru, at least for telling us a little bit more about, you know, the science behind change. Yeah, and as Nuru was just mentioning the two books, I just wanted to show you. So the book that talks about the elephant and the rider, the one that's called Switch, that's really this one. So for those of you interested to find out a little bit more, and then the second book that Nuru was talking about, which is the Chimp Paradox, which we kind of made mandatory reading in RavelWorks. So those are the two books. And I promise you, we're not getting commission from the authors. It's just books that we ourselves really like reading. So, so just in case. But now that we have seen a bit more around change at individual level and the science behind it, let's look at it from an organizational and a leadership perspective. And if you're an HR practitioner, a manager and leader in this call, that's likely what you are facing right now. On the one hand, your own individual change, but also trying to help your team navigate through the change. Now, all of our webinars, we always like to kind of put them into context, and our context for the most part is sub-Saharan Africa. And so that's what we'll do here first as well. So for a long time on the screen, you can kind of see some of the publications over the last couple of years that we've seen come out of sub-Saharan Africa. And while a few years ago we were still called the hopeless continent, we started to see over the last 5 years more and more positive language coming in terms of Africa rising, you know, Africa unchained, aspiring Africa, the new continent, all of these things. So putting us really on the global map, a lot of investors saying, well, Africa is the future, you know, it's the continent with the youngest workforce. Here is where we need to be investing. And particularly seeing that the technology of the fourth industrial revolution has really penetrated our continent quite a lot. So giving us a lot of opportunities. And we know that right now, COVID-19 is on everybody's mind, and we're saying, oh, it's the new normal, it's the new future of working, you know, being remote, connecting via telephones and Zoom calls and Skype calls. But if you think about it, we've been talking about the future of work, including at continental level, for years now, right? If you just type into Google future of work, you will find over 3.5 billion search hits, right? And many of you in this call yourself We'll have had corporate discussions. You will have had strategic retreats. You will have had board meetings, PowerPoint presentations around, you know, how the way that we are working and the way that we think about work is changing. And on the screen are kind of some of the common words that we've heard across boardrooms. You know, people talking about VUCA, innovation. We need to be agile, flexible. You know, we need to navigate this complexity. So all of these words, we have been busy heralding them around. But when disruption actually hits us, in this case, it's COVID-19, we've all become flustered, right? We've thrown out all of our contingency plans and our beautiful put together PowerPoint slides, and instead we have let the elephant take over. So the point is really to reflect on what opportunities are emerging for us in sub-Saharan Africa as a result of the new normal. What is coming out for us as businesses and as organizations. And one person is asking, what is VUCA? So VUCA is a term that has been thrown around more and more in the last couple of years. But what basically it's an acronym, right? So that's talking about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And they've kind of put it into one VUCA. So you'll see a lot of articles talking about the new world of VUCA, VUCA, VUCA. And that's exactly what we have right now. We are in VUCA, right? It's uncertain times, it's complex, there's a lot of ambiguity. So like I was saying, how do we make use of this, right? How can we tap into the technology which we already have to ensure business continuity and make sure we pass through that curve that Nuru was showing us as teams and organizations really quickly so that we can be sustainable and competitive. So at organizational level, when we talk about change, many of you will be familiar with this cycle or with the traditional kind of organizational change cycle that's about to come up on the slide. If you don't mind, thank you. If we can just move to the next slide. Right. So I want to be very clear. We're not trying to conduct here some kind of academic exercise. You know, some of you might have a cycle with 7 circles, others with 8, others are using a pyramid. It doesn't really matter, right? What is important is that the fundamental kind of stages remain the same. So the first point in any change process is having that common reference. In this particular case, our common reference is COVID-19, right? That is the driver of our change. It's an external driver which is necessitating all of us to make adjustments, okay? In more, let's say, regular business times, that change driver might be a merger, it might be an acquisition, it might be opening new operations or closing, or if you're in the non-profit, might be a new program. But in this particular case, it's an external driver, which is COVID-19. So, and our job as organizational leaders there is really creating awareness around that. And when I mean creating awareness, it's not hype and panic, but it's creating awareness in terms of, as an organization, we are cognizant this is happening, and this is how we are going to deal with it in our particular business, whether we're in insurance, whether we're legal corporations, whether we're a restaurant. So it's helping people move away from the panic that is on Facebook and WhatsApp and Twitter. The second point is then more around preparedness. Now that we know COVID is here, how are we preparing our organizations? How are we adjusting our systems, our structures, our strategy? Nuru was saying in January, we all had nice strategies in place, we had work plans in place, but the preparedness phase comes next. And here your job as an organizational leader or as an HR practitioner is to create that willingness, okay? So it's helping your teams move from the shock and the denial and the resistance to now the exploration, for example. Moving from there is now on the organizing, right? So that's creating the commitment. A lot of times as individuals, we are aware that something needs to be changed. We know what needs to be changed, but we can't get our elephant under control to commit to that kind of change. And I know lots of you have already transitioned into organizing and implementing, which is now, you know, moving to working from home. Some of your staff, you have put them on leave because they are positions that cannot actually work from home. You have put in place new technologies to allow your teams to communicate with each other. I think one of the big companies that's making good headways as a result of COVID-19 is Zoom, right? Their subscription has jumped through the roof with the number of companies at global level all of a sudden purchasing a Zoom subscription. And finally is the consolidating that, right? And there your job as a manager or leader is really to institutionalize those new ways of working. And we might see in 6 months or 8 months, many of those new models and ways of working being part of your new normal. So one of the models that I would like to show you, because it's a really useful framework for us to look at change from a managerial and organizational perspective, is the color theory. And that was developed by somebody, by Dr. Leon Kaluve, and some of you might have seen this before. But basically the framework kind of looks at change in 5 different colors. And it's both about change in terms of how you as a manager behave and think about change, but also looking at the change cycle and seeing what kind of change approach is most useful at different stages, okay? So the red change agent or the red thinking is really about the people perspective, okay? And that's about inspiring people, motivating them under the premises that people will change when they feel cared for. And that goes back again to the elephant kind of thing, right? So it's focusing really on the soft aspects. And you might find that in the beginning, as your organization transitions to the new normal, you're going to have to spend a lot more time on the red. So both on the empathy and encouraging and inspiring people, but also being very clear of, well, what happens when people are not performing, right? Because there's a grace period, but we can't go on forever saying, well, you know, there's so much confusion, we're just going to wait for everybody to eventually settle. The second role you might need to play in a change process is blue. And that is really change from a planning perspective. So that's, you know, believing that change will happen if people can see the clear kind of results and the clear framework for that. Yeah, and here you can see the rider being presented, right? The rational one. So the thing is, again, it's balancing the two, right? When your staff is very, very emotional, putting together a Gantt chart or some kind of planning tool or a Raki is not going to fix the situation, right? So you might in the beginning have a very red process, but with some blue undercurrents, right? So as you're focusing on people, you're also bringing in some structure to say, okay, team meetings every Wednesday, or this is the new way that we're going to connect on a weekly or bi-weekly kind of basis. A lot of companies in normal times, you're very good in the blue, but you are struggling with some of the other pieces because you don't know how to fully institutionalize the other components, right? The blue is what we get in all of our management books. So the green then. So green is really looking more at change from a learning perspective, okay? So that's saying basically people will change once they have the new abilities, the new confidence, right? Again, in the curve, we could see that at some point we go into exploration. Now, what's happening in many of your organizations is that your teams are being confronted with new technologies that they all of a sudden need to use, which they were not using in the office, okay? As much as you might have had a SharePoint system or Microsoft Team or Kaizala or whatever you were using, you might find that uptake wasn't so great because people preferred to just walk to somebody's desktop or give somebody a call. So there's also a lot that you need to invest in terms of giving your teams the confidence, the learning, right? As we learn how to navigate, we become more comfortable with the change. So again, you can see that in a COVID-19 situation, we might have red elements, the blue undercurrent, and then kind of speckles of green, giving people also the opportunity to learn and develop themselves to get some of these new skills. The yellow component on change is really a change from a power perspective, okay? So that's making sure that you are able to focus people on common interests, okay? And strive towards those collective goals. So what we see very frequently is that people's public positions on something will change as long as their underlying interests and needs are still being met. So in a yellow kind of change process, you are going to have to spend a lot of time on negotiation, right, with staff. So making it more, let's say, democratic on certain elements. Perhaps in the past, you always had your team meetings on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. You might need to change that, right? You might need to now change it to a different day or to a different time, or even move from the synchronous to more asynchronous meetings that are then recorded and people can watch them in their own time, if that is what is more comfortable for the majority of your teams. I talked about the position changing if interests and needs are met. So you might see some of your team members right now not getting on board with certain things. And that's their public position, okay? But it's never your new policy or your new system which is causing people the problem. It's the underlying interests and needs, okay? You need to recognize that some of your people had positions of influence and power, not necessarily formally in the hierarchy, but those underlying, right, dynamics of who holds what information, who has access to you as the leader, who's been here the longest. And some of that is being taken away from people right now. So it's understanding people's underlying needs. Maybe different people should be leading some of the meetings that you're doing to still give them that feeling of having the influence or being viewed in a certain way. It's just an example, right? And finally, the last piece is really change from a white thinking perspective. And that's more related with, you know, change just being a spontaneous evolution, saying, well, we can't control it anyways, so let's just have a laissez-faire approach. Everything will somehow fall into place, okay? And I'm not advocating for you to take the white approach or any of the other approaches permanently, right? You can't just abdicate your responsibility as a leader and say, well, I'm taking the white thinking approach, so everybody just sort yourself out and, you know, we'll check back again in a few months' time. But what we need to be looking at is that as much as no color is the best, but for you as a leader to navigate your team and your organization through it, you need to recognize that at different stages of the change cycle, a different thinking is required, and sometimes multiple things might be going on, right? So like I said, a bit of blue, considering also red, and mainstreaming some white into it, so not, you know, losing your cool if things don't go to plan at all. So this is just a framework that we can use, a useful reference point to start ourselves over. But I would like to hand back to Nuru, who is really going to tell us a little bit more about, you know, at individual level, what can we be doing as leaders, as managers, Nuru? What, yeah. Nuru, sorry, we need to unmute you. We haven't got you yet. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, thank you. So what then can we do as individuals and organizations to manage change in the face of uncertainty? That's what we need to talk about. And clearly, I really like quotes, but I love this particular one, okay? You must learn to adjust yourself to the conditions you have to endure, but make a point of trying to alter or correct conditions so that they're most favorable to you.
We haven't got you yet. Sorry.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me?
No, we hear you fine. We hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, all right, sorry. So what then can we do as individuals and organizations to manage change in the face of uncertainty? So even when change happens during a normal time, it's really still hard to navigate, okay? Now, change during a crisis is much harder. So because it disrupts people's expectations of the future, okay, it reduces a sense of self-control, and it impedes your ability to process information. And you know what happens when we are stressed? We don't make rational decisions. Our elephant takes over, isn't it? And so we end up doing things like this. We do things we didn't mean to do. You know, we say things and then we say, oh, we are so sorry. I didn't mean to say that to you. I was so angry, because the elephant is the one that has taken over. Okay. So, and remember also during COVID-19, all of us are in our homes, and we are social beings. We are used to being around people. Some of us even live alone. Okay. We are used to having a water cooler conversation. So if you introduce a change process, then I can reach out to Faye and say, oh, did you hear about this? Does it make sense to you? Are you buying into it? I no longer have that luxury. Of course, I could pick the phone, but it's not just right at my fingertips the way it was when I did not have these restrictions, okay? And this is where we are trying to implement change under that environment, okay? So there's a few things here that you can see on the screen that we think you should really consider as you're implementing change and uncertainty. Now, we will, we have 5 items listed there. We have leadership is key, making your goals a bit more short term, ensuring collaboration within your team. You want people to talk to each other, and give feedback, and communication, and keeping a positive attitude. I'm going to delve a little bit more on 3 items: leadership, communication, and keeping a positive attitude, okay? All right? So leadership is key right now, and it's key. I mean, it's key in any organization, even if we're not going through COVID-19, it's still a key concept. But right now, we must change how we lead, okay? Faye was talking about, tending towards the red and then, the blue later on. We must think from that perspective now. So in times of crisis, leaders, managers, you play a very essential role. Yeah? People want to feel protected. They want to know the way forward in respect to the changes that are taking place, okay? You need to take that big vision that you had in the beginning of 2020 and now chunk it up into concrete actions, because that vision was okay then when we could meet and talk to each other and there was no COVID and I wasn't fearing for my life and my children. But right now, I just need to know what to do now so that we can navigate a change process. I don't want to see that overall picture. So as a leader, chunk it up. As managers, chunk up the change. You know where you want to go? Give people weekly goals, daily goals. Don't stretch it too much, okay? Because people must really adapt. So script the moves and steps that the teams need to take. Be very clear, okay? Ambiguity, remember, when we're asking for clarity, we're appealing to your rider, okay? Ambiguity is very tiring for your rider. When you start operating from an ambiguous space, even your elephant doesn't know what to do. It just falls back to the way we used to do things before. So please, this is where as leaders, you really need to be clear, even with your teams as regard change, okay? Now, I wanted to just give an example. We keep hearing all the briefs from our respective governments, okay? This is what's happening now. So what we expect you to do is this. We are going to lock down. We are going to go to isolation, social distancing. They are telling us what to do. They are not saying, but it's obvious. If it's a flu, no. They are being very clear, okay, about what we need to do to go through this phase, okay? In Kenya, we keep getting briefings from our president, He doesn't put it on a newspaper. He talks to us. We feel like we are engaged, and this is the way we need to go, because that's what we need to see. Leadership is key. Now, starting at the top with your changes. Okay, like here, I've seen some organizations where staff has taken salary cuts, and it starts from the leadership. They say, from this point, we're taking a salary cut, okay? And then if you come to me later and say, okay, Nuru, we have to make changes. And some of the changes are really drastic, include salary cut. I saw that happen already. You talked to me, you communicated. But more than that, you walked the talk. Don't tell me don't cut my salary or, we are changing this, but you're not changing, okay? So right now, leadership needs to start from the top. We need to see what we're doing, because then we'll emulate your behavior. So if you're implementing a change process, emulate what you need for your team to see. Last week, we were talking about putting on your video during a remote call. Do it yourself to begin with. If you do it, I probably will too. Now, of course, change takes place faster in a culture of trust. Now, if before in your organization, trust was not really big, you still have an opportunity to do it, okay? To try and nurture a culture of trust, okay? And what then you could do to do this is be more transparent about the changes, because then what happens is your change process can move faster. Honesty is key for staff. People don't want to hear, we are changing this, but I think, because they see there's a hidden agenda. And if they think there's a hidden agenda, they will spend more time thinking about that hidden agenda than even implement or thinking about this change or the importance of that change to them, okay? Please remember, you're appealing to the red. You're appealing to the elephant, isn't it? So that you can be able to move out in terms of this during this crisis and to implement your change. The other one I want to talk about is communication. Now, in times of despair, people will look to leaders for clarity, okay? Especially when we are navigating change, okay? So your team is hungry for information and updates. Beef up your communication stream. When you're implementing change, usually in the normal circumstance, here you'll send communication. It will be maybe bi-weekly, you'll receive this. Right now, people want to see more information to understand the change that you're trying to implement, okay? So be more accessible. I was just thinking, you know, we have this policy, people say everywhere, I have an open door policy. Well, have a virtual open door policy. Let your team somehow be able to reach you, to ask for clarification when they need it, okay? Remember, part of this also ends up with you having a team with high morale, a team that can actually say, we went through change, but let me tell you, our leadership really took us through. They really talked to us. They were very open and they were very honest, okay? Now remember, as you're doing this communication, what you're doing is speaking to the elephant, because you want to cure the fears and anxieties and say that there'll be pleasure at the end of this. We're moving together, okay? Now, if you don't communicate, what do you leave room for? Gut feelings, gossip, and rumors. You don't want that when you're trying to implement a change. It can really, really lead people not to embrace what you want them to change. Now, teams are more likely to embrace change if they know what is happening, of course. So again, transparency is key. In Kenya, I guess, like, you know, our health cabinet secretary has been updating us on the numbers, you know. If there's a rumor that comes up even on Twitter, on social media, he actually takes time to address it with the nation, okay? So it gives a sense of comfort. When someone says something, I'm like, I'm waiting for my cabinet secretary to tell me what is happening. Same thing for you when you're navigating change in your organization. People are looking to you to give information. This is not the time to leave room for speculation. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And engage people with the right information, okay? Remember, we are being flooded with a lot of information. Right now, we're operating on stress mode. You know, don't send me a long email. I won't read it. Small, short messages that, you know, can speak to me or talk about them exactly what you want me to understand. You know, be clear. A lot of clarity is needed right now. Choose your messengers wisely. And I really like this part. You know, when you're implementing change, you want people, your change agents, to be people who your organization team members can trust, okay? Because right now what will happen is people will trust more the messenger than the message that is being given. Now, if you send someone who, and you send Nuru, and basically Nuru is known as, that person who, you know, she spreads rumors, she's not very honest, and you send me with an important message, it's unlikely that it will get the same traction as comes out. People say, oh, is it Nuru who shared? No, I know. If it's Nuru, she's coming from a good place. We trust her. Let's just try and follow her and see where we need to go. So pick your change agents really well to communicate. Show empathy when you start your communication. Find out how people are doing. Acknowledge that, you know, this is not the norm and, you know, people are struggling. Acknowledge that in your communication. Show empathy. Again, we keep saying people need to know you care. And finally, keep a positive attitude. Now, I know, you know, what I liked in the poll, you know, a lot of people have gone through the Kubler-Ross curve, and we saw almost over 60% of you are on acceptance, you know, acceptance or exploration. But remember, we still have people who are frustrated. We still have people who are in shock. We still have people who are in depression. Your job as leaders, as managers, is to move them forward, okay? Okay? So keeping a positive attitude helps people to say, well, you know, there's hope. There is hope. Let's just, so try. Keep the corporate climate positive, you know, by being enthusiastic. Find those small things that really motivate people, okay? Now, usually in a change process, you'll find there are people who embrace it really fast and they're able to start doing things differently. Acknowledge those people, all right? The thing about acknowledging them, recognizing them, you know, is that inherently as human beings, we want to be appreciated, okay? It motivates me. Now, if Nuru feels motivated, it's very likely that Faye will be, okay, so Nuru seems happy with this. Okay, let me try that too. So appreciate people, okay? Now, if a staff member is doing something good, again, let them, you know, find a ways for other people to replicate it. So say if Faye was doing something really good in part of this change management process, they had embraced something and they were doing it well, but Nuru is not, you know, you wanted maybe reports submitted and Nuru is just not getting it done on time because it's part of this change. I never used to submit this report before, why do you need? But Faye is submitting reports on time. Now don't focus on Nuru's negativity in this change. Focus on Faye's positivity. Take that Faye is doing very well and employ it onto Nuru. You know, let Nuru job shadow Faye. Use Faye to mentor Nuru, you know, so that then you move me along the curve. Okay, so focusing on the positive will really move you forward. And finally, I will say, celebrate small wins. Celebrate small wins, okay? We want, you know, everything seems to be falling apart. You wake up, there's news, your WhatsApp has something, Twitter has something, oh, there's an address we have to watch, oh, the numbers are rising. But really, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Celebrate those small wins with your team. You started to implement a change process, and maybe it was a shared drive, and oh my God, you had 4 people who worked on a document together. Maybe they're a team of 20, but 4 people did it. Celebrate that. You will get people more interested. You know, people always feel, what, 4 people do it? Even I'm going to do it. That's what you want to do. You want to appeal to the elephant again. Get them moving, okay? Yeah, because what you want is people to feel valued as part of this change, okay? And now you're doing it remotely, all right? I have seen questions. People are saying that I should address, but I saw there was a response. Maybe we can address that as part of the Q&A, Faye. What do you think? So we move to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a request for those of you who are not presenting, if you can switch off your videos, unless you want us to see your videos. Go ahead, Nuru.
Okay. So now, the difficult for change is not in the development of new ideas. It's not in, oh, this is what we need to do, but it's in escaping the old ideas that determine our thinking, okay? So as we talk about this, as we leave you today, this is what we are imploring you to do. This is the time for you to find, as individuals, as organizations, this is the time for you to deliberately invest in, for example, learning and capacity building, you know, for you as an individual and for your team members and organizations as a whole, okay? Because you have time, you can assess your skill gaps, you can look and see, so where do we want to go? When this is all done, what are the opportunities that will be there? So what skill sets do we need to develop, okay? So developing skills for the future right now. And I think this is absolutely the right time to do it, to be honest. The other thing is, you know, we came up now, you know, we are all working from home. I'm hosting this from my house. Faye is in her house. Most of you are taking this from home, isn't it? So a lot of us have started to embrace change in terms of we are looking at remote working becoming a new norm. Okay, what does that mean? What could it mean for some organizations? Could it be that, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't need an office space to rent, you know? Maybe this is working so well, we just need to schedule time to meet. So all these are changes that could happen and you could pick on and ride on the positivity. But you have to make a deliberate decision, okay? To find ways to grow during this change and ways to do things differently that will work for you as an individual, your team, and organizations as a whole. Okay, I will turn this back to Faye for a Q&A session.
Thank you, Nuru, for sharing some of these insights with us. So one of the questions already that came through right at the beginning was somebody saying, okay, how do we, you know, regulate our teams and make sure they're working from home efficiently? What I'm going to do is in the chat function now, I have just sent it, is a link to our YouTube recording from last week. We had a webinar on 3rd of April last week, which talked specifically about remote working. And if you can't access the link via the chat, oh, sorry, I've just seen I've sent it to everybody in the waiting room. My apologies. One more time. Here you go. Here's the link now. But anyways, if you're on our mailing list, then we can resend that to you as well. Just reach out to us on operations@ravel.works and we can share with you that. So I won't go into so much about the details of remote working at the moment. So we had a couple of other questions here as well that came, and one of them was kind of like, well, how do I balance overly emotional? Somebody said overly emotional, staff members. So we've tried all of this. We've, implemented green and yellow and red and blue, but some staff members are still very emotional. And how do I get them to work effectively? So there's kind of multiple angles to this particular question. And on the first side, it's really recognizing that it takes people different amounts of time to go through the curve, okay? We cannot say it should be 72 hours or 1 week and then everybody should be fine. And we can also not compare and say, well, my situation is worse than yours, okay? Which is what's happening a lot of times, right? People are saying, well, at least it's not like me. I have 5 children and I have my mother-in-law and I have my this. It's really everybody's dealing with it quite differently, and what is stressing one person and causing them to be unfocused might not be important for somebody else, right? So for some of us, we took a lot of solace in being able to go to our relevant places of worship. Those have all been closed. That can be something quite stressful for one of your team members, where you might say, well, why don't you just pray at home, for example, right? For some of us, we might be very stressed because we have all of the family members in our house, and some of the family members might be elderly, they need additional care. So that's kind of really the first part there. It's don't compare yourself with others. And the second piece is one of the things that we're doing in RavelWorks is, and I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but it's have dedicated time slots for panic, right? You have recognized that people have a rider, okay? They are emotional right now. So give staff the opportunity to panic. And everybody can panic whenever that's most convenient for them, right? Some of your staff, they want to take 2 hours in the morning before they start working to go, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. How will I pay my bills? Other staff might take that opportunity at 11 o'clock in the morning to panic, others before night. So it allows some of that as well. And when staff come and say, I can't work right now, I'm, discombobulated, just listen. Your only job right now is to listen, and you can find out and say, is there anything that we can do at organizational level to help you transition through this, okay? So that's it. I also want to say, for some of you saying that, what do I do with staff who are refusing to work, is look, a good employee is a good employee, okay? People who are high performers pre-COVID are likely to also be high performers after COVID or during COVID. It just means they need some time maybe to get there. If you had employees that you were struggling with already before COVID, then of course, taking this now remote is not going to make it any easier, right? If people were not delivering already before, or you had to spend a lot of time with them, that's not going to change. And there you might want to look at your standard practices for performance management, whether that is putting people on a specific PDP, professional development plan, or PIP, professional improvement plan. It's just that your timelines for the PIP might be longer, whereas before you might have said 30 days, you might now be looking at, a 60-day timeline so that people get to learn the software. I don't know, Nuru, do you want to say anything about, the dealing with emotional staff as well?
No, I think you've captured it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We had a question. There's a question here about where somebody said, where do I start? And there's another person who says, how do I manage it without my staff without pay? So where to start is a question which everybody is asking. And I can't give you a kind of situation that says this is the best place to start, because I don't know the industry that you're in, okay? What I can tell you is how we started in RavelWorks Africa. So when we started to see, now things are being canceled or being postponed, we just shifted into gear immediately, and we said, listen, let's assume that for the next 120 plus days, everything is virtual. Nothing is happening face to face, nobody is sitting with anybody. What does that mean for us? And started to create a kind of plan from there. Now, if the situation gets better before, that's great. But if not, at least for 120 days, we can have that mindset to say, don't worry about what was yesterday. Don't worry about the meeting, the training. Just go for online right now. So we moved on that pretty quickly. And like I said, we integrated panic time into our own individual time slots. I don't dictate when people need to panic. And what Nuru said as well is we try to start off every meeting with just 5-10 minutes, people just sharing what's going on in their lives right now. We very often do a kind of poll to start with and say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling right now? 1 is being I'm feeling really down, and 5 is being I'm feeling great. And just to get people to get that off their chest. And we're also a lot more, I would say, patient right now with when delays happen or when phone calls don't take place, because we understand that internet goes down. One of my colleagues on this call, Charles, has not had internet, I think, for 3 days now. Nuru last week was working in her car because there was no electricity. So those kind of examples, right? You can't blame people for that. It's not their choice. It's just what's happening, and they're still trying to make things happen. I see a lot of you in the chat are saying, okay, panic time, that's great, that's great. So you let us know afterwards how the panic time is kind of working. And somebody's saying, okay, what should I expect after panic time? There's nothing specific that you should expect. It's just acknowledging that right now people need that time, okay? Whenever that happens for them, they need to, in a way, think about it this way. It's exercising the elephant. If you allow the elephant to roam, a couple of minutes or an hour a day, it's much easier to control it, because what you can't do right now is try to suppress it and pretend it is not there. There was another question which was asking about how do I get my staff to manage without pay? And that's a critical one, okay? For all of you who are maybe in the service industry particularly, where if you're running a hotel or a restaurant or some other type of business, which means you make money by people interacting with you, you've had to send people home quite quickly because you can't keep a restaurant running for 2 months with no guests, right? What we are seeing is businesses taking very different approaches. So on the one hand, what we keep saying as well is if you have different cadres of staff, it is likely that the staff at the bottom end of your cadre, so that could be your security, your cleaners, your receptionists, or these kind of things, have much lower salaries than those of you at the top. And it's trying to cushion them more because their runway is very short. And you might not be able to cushion them with money necessarily unless you agree to pay out their leave, for example. But you might be able to cushion them with other kind of care packages, right? Whether that is food packages or hand sanitizers or masks or something that makes it a bit easier for them to manage in this transition. We've also seen organizations for people that can't work right now because their job requires them to be in the office, is putting them onto learning programs and say, listen, you can't be a receptionist right now, but I can invest, $100 or 12,000 Kenya shillings in you to take an Excel course, for example. So it gives them something to do. Now, that's about as far as you can go, right? You can't magically create finances. You can't take away the fear of how are we going to pay bills, how are we going to pay rent. But at least as an employer, you can get more engaged in that and also talk to your staff. The ones that are on lockdown and that are right now affected by this, why not organize a group call to say, how can we support you as an organization? And you might not be able to get to all the suggestions, but you might hear a couple of things that are a lot cheaper than you currently think about. Nuru had already mentioned, we're seeing in many corporations, the top managers are taking salary cuts. So if you are a company that right now has a lot of allowances for certain levels, you might consider cutting those allowances for those levels and then redistributing those savings to some of your most vulnerable staff. Nuru, I'm just checking if you had something that you wanted to add there.
I think, no, there was a question before somebody had asked about the short-term goals and collaboration. Maybe I can address that. I don't have anything to add at this point. Okay. So when we were looking at uncertainty, the two that we left out were short-term goals and collaboration. Okay. Now, when we started the year, like I said before, we had a long-term plan. We always start and we say our annual plan is to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now, the way things are, you know, we see all these messages, oh, this could go until May, it could go until June. Some people are even saying it could go until September. But in the meantime, some of us are actually being able to continue to work in the spheres that we operate from, okay? So if you want to implement change right now, what you want to do is to chunk up your goals into tasks that are easily manageable, okay? Things that we need to achieve in the immediate future, then focusing on the end result, okay? So chunk it up, introduce change to a work breakdown structure that is manageable, okay? So you could do it maybe bi-weekly. This is what we need to do to get here because the change is there. So chunk up, that's what we meant. Set short-term goals. This is not the time to even have monthly goals, to be honest, okay? So if you have a monthly goal, look at it again. What do I want people to do within this week, within next week, okay? Because then what it does is it simplifies and you're able to appeal to the elephant, okay? And then when we're talking about collaboration, we're saying this is, as part of collaboration, it assists you to help people to understand why you're doing what you're doing and for you to know how they feel about what you're doing, okay? It gives you time to hear, you know, their needs, their concerns, their fears, to implement something new. Remember, to implement change, it's the elephant you're really appealing to. It could be very rational what you want to do, but collaboration then allows people to exchange ideas, isn't it? So in collaboration, and then like Faye was saying, you know, the underlying blue, you know, so that people then can feel heard. Because when people feel heard, they say, yeah, I was part of that change process, okay? We collaborated with so-and-so. This is actually my idea, you know? And people tend to get change implemented faster, or even actually to navigate change better when they feel they were part of the process of reviewing that change, okay? That is what, do you want to add anything there, Faye?
No, Nuru, we have, you know, 2 more questions, I guess, in closing. So one question is somebody saying, you know, what do I do if I have a supervisor who's not willing to share information? And some of you might be experiencing this, right? The big change that you are all going through is that when you are in the office, it's much easier to receive certain information. Once we are all in our own various, you know, compounds, we might be feeling left out, or we feel, well, why wasn't I on this phone call or in this Zoom meeting, or why don't I have access to this particular document? So it's 2 components. Is one, acknowledging perhaps that it's not intentional that somebody is not sharing information with you. Perhaps they are still trying to work out the blue, right? What is exactly the plan? How will information be shared with who at what point? They might not be fully aware of who needs to have access to what. Secondly, could also be going back to the kind of yellow component in change, right? I said positions change as long as people's interests and needs are still being met. So supervisors might have before been seen as, you know, I'm the knowledge holder, I have all the information. And now, by virtue of me sitting, you know, outside of the office, I might have a feeling that I'm losing some power. I'm losing my position within the organization. And we also don't know where your supervisors are when it comes to the Kubler-Ross curve, right? They might also still be in denial or frustration or depression. So I would say the first thing there is one, acknowledge that it might not be on purpose that they're not sharing information. You know, you might want to check with your supervisors or as a team as a whole to say, how do we want to share information to make sure everybody can continue their work? And second of all, might also just be a question of being a bit more patient with your actual supervisors, right? To also allow them to manage their elephant. Oh, now the questions are coming in. Wow. Now, a couple of, let me answer 2 more, and then Nuru, I have one for you still about the short-term goals. There was another one which asked about, you know, unemployment. And you know, if I'm being made redundant as a result of COVID-19, or perhaps even I was unemployed before COVID-19, what should I be thinking about? Yeah, and here what you should be thinking about is really, first of all, what kind of transferable skills do you have? You know, what skills have you built up in the last couple of months, years in your career that you can easily transfer to another industry or to another line of business? And what will be some of the skills of the future, right? What is becoming very clear is that skills of the future will rely on issues around technology and new ways of influencing and connecting people. So it's looking at how you can, in this time period, build those skills, or how you can transfer your existing ones to be relevant post COVID-19. And Nuru, there was a final question for you, which was really about short-term goals. Are we talking about short-term goals for now, or are we talking about new goals because of COVID-19, or what is it that we're talking about?
Okay, in this presentation, when we were doing it, the short-term goals were focusing on what we had. Like when we started the year, we had goals. They were long-term, okay? So what we want to do is take those long-term goals and chunk them up into short-term goals. Remember, we still want to achieve what we wanted to achieve. Now, new goals, that's very likely. With COVID-19, it might disrupt what we could feasibly achieve in 2020. So chances are for some of you, it is resetting new goals. But for most of us also, it's taking the goals that we had and chunking them up in a way, number one, that people don't feel overwhelmed anymore. Number two, that they can see that things are concrete. They can say, I will do this week and do that next week. Because what people are now trying to do is operating on a shorter term basis, okay? We don't know what we don't know, but we need to keep working. We need to keep doing the things that we're doing to reinvent ourselves, to you know, deliver what we had said we were going to deliver. Okay, so the short-term goals is really looking at your long-term and then chunking them up into shorter goals, all right? But also acknowledging that with the pandemic, it is very likely that for most of us, we will go back and say some of these goals either need to be reduced, or some are not achievable, or some are achievable at this point. Okay,
thanks,
Faye,
Nuru.
back to you.
And the final question before we close is, says one of you has said, you know, what do I do with a staff member who doesn't want to open up, and who in the past I could see, you know, something is wrong because I was physically in the same office with them. Now I don't know what is it. Yeah, and so here again, I think the first thing which we've been saying in all of our webinars is patience right now, okay? So maybe they don't want to open up right now, maybe in another week they will be more comfortable. But if you are a leader or a manager, my suggestion for you is really schedule one-on-one check-ins with your team. Nuru had already said, if it is possible, enable your video, okay? If you can't use Zoom, it's enable your video over WhatsApp or via Instagram. As a matter of fact, I found out recently that if you do video calls over Instagram, they tend to take a lot less bandwidth and they seem to be a lot clearer. So if you have, I don't know what industry you're in, but if you have a lot of stuff on Instagram, that can be one way, right? So if bandwidth is the issue. So it's just taking a bit of time and checking in with people. You know, when you do the call, it's not like, okay, what happened to the report? How far have we reached on the, you know, on our strategy? But really checking and saying, how are you doing today? What's going on your end? And Nuru always likes to give the example. She says, you know, be vulnerable yourself. So when people can see that you are opening up yourself by saying, you know, I'm struggling today because my 2-year-old is sick, and we don't have electricity, people tend to open up more to you. I know it's very difficult for us as leaders and managers sometimes to do that because we've been conditioned to be that kind of solid rock. Everything always needs to be fine and always needs to be okay, but it doesn't allow people to connect with us. So that can be really a practice which you integrate. I know it's something that I'm trying to do a lot more. I recently had a call with Nuru and she told me, you sound stressed. And the reality is I was extremely stressed. I had 7 or 8 different things I was trying to fix. But my initial response is I was like, no, it's fine. Let's just move. Because you've been conditioned, right? You can never say I'm stressed. I'm also overwhelmed. I'm going crazy right now. So learn to be vulnerable yourself can also help others in your team feel more comfortable to tell you where they are struggling. So on that note, just to let all of you know, the webinar, as all of the others, is being recorded, and next week you will receive the recorded version from us for those of you who opted in when you signed up. I thank you. I mean, we had at some point over 200 people being logged in, so that's really wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us. I hope it has been useful. You can follow us on those particular social media channels. Once again, thank you for the Interagency Working Group for sending your members, for HMAO, many of you are present, and of course, Nairobi Garage. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday and a long weekend if you can. For those of you who are working over the weekend, keep working. Remember to slot in your panic time, okay? 45 minutes to 2 hours panic time.